Hello, hello, and welcome to episode 49 of Trails in the Pod. I'm Colin. That's Kevin.
We really fucked out by not having episode 50, a nice big milestone anniversary, be the conclusion and cap of the Liberal arc, Colin. I gotta say.
Yeah, we probably could have extended out another one of these doors. Maybe have an episode on some of these fucking sun doors. I wasn't thinking. I take complete responsibility.
No episode on the Sun Doors, Colin. If I have to discuss the capital shooting game, the fishing game, or even the tournament, I will literally die.
I have to admit, because we didn't do any episodes on the sun doors other than the shooting game, which I remind you did not work for me, I didn't do any of them, so they're not part of my retrospective.
And that is for the best, because we are all about bestie good things today, because we are doing a retrospective of Trails in the Sky the Third. I loved it. I'm very interested to hear Colin explain why his opinion changed and how.
Yeah, so I guess I'll just give the short version, and then we can kind of dive into it. And some of it, I think, is a product of how we played the game. We played this very slowly, and we played this game slower than the other two because I was also trying to stream it at the same time, and that was a very difficult thing to do, to balance my life with the streaming and keeping it on pace with the podcast, which is why eventually I stopped doing it, because I couldn't make it work. But what that meant was we played this game over like 6 months, and with Trails in the Sky FC, Trails in the Sky SC, the way that we were playing it was we'd have a huge chunk of like everything making sense, the narrative going, then we'd stop, talk about it, then continue on. Whereas we were playing this game more in like fits and starts. And on top of that, there were multiple times that we would finish a chapter, all ready to record an episode on it, only to realize that there was not enough plot in that episode, in that chapter, to actually have an episode, because the game is designed in a completely different way in how its plot is presented, how its characters change. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily better or worse. I think it's quite interesting, like the doors, for instance. But in terms of pacing, I really found in this second playthrough that it was much less well-paced than I remember it being. Because when I first played it, I played it in a binge. So like in a week or 2 weeks, I was done, and I saw everything.
And so I'm interested, when you first played it, how did you do the doors? As they came up, did you skip some? How did it differ, or how is it similar to how we did it?
Yeah, so I did the doors as they came in, insofar as I was able. There are some doors that you cannot do when you first find them, and then you find the item that lets you do it, and then you go back. It kind of, it's not quite a Metroidvania thing, but there's some Metroidvania elements in that you have to earn the later reward to get back to the earlier secret. And that was fun. Whereas now what we did was, at least what I did, was I kept putting off all of the doors until it was time to like talk about them. Which meant I was money-starved a lot of the time, because they provide you with money. And also, a lot of the best narratives in the game comes from the doors. Not all the doors are hitters, but those that are good are really good. And we didn't really see them until the end.
So you're very right on money. You're right on the narrative. Also, there's some really good equipment ports. Like the Gladiator headbands, I believe, come from the doors. The Gladiator equipment that raises CP automatically. I think some of the Divine Blade Lord and Divine Edgelord emblems come from the doors.
Divine Edgelord.
Really good stat boosting accessories, or the Tiger Hearts, what say you? So that is, Ludo narrative.
Yes.
Disintegration, or you see the mal effects, I'm not sure what to call it.
I wouldn't call this little narrative anything, because it has nothing to do really with the narrative. But and to be fair, we have to keep this in mind. The way that we played the game was not the way that the developers intended the game to be played. The developers intended you to take it as it comes, to play through it. Maybe you finish it in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, not 6 months. So our experience is very much informed by all the reasons why you had to have delays or take our time in certain things. And so I do want to make it clear that I don't... It's weird. our opinions are going to be our
Yes.
opinions. At the same time, it's our responsibility to keep our opinions in perspective. And for that, I mean, I have also my first impressions of the game from like a couple of years ago to also balance back on that. But I do think it is weird that there are like half the chapters in the game, nothing happens.
Yeah. It's you go from A to B to advance the plot, unlock a new level, but a lot of them you didn't have to go through the plane. I guess the only plot advancement would be you find more ceiling stones.
Yeah, so there is that whole thing of, ooh, what character am I going to get? And that's pretty cool, right? Especially when you get to the end and you say, like, wait a minute, we're getting Richard? That's weird. We're getting Ren? What the hell? Like, there's some surprise there. That's pretty interesting. And the fact that you find, like, Joshua before you find Estelle, it's putting them into new situations. You don't always have everybody. There's a fun aspect to that, but most of the plot in the game itself happens at the beginning of a chapter. In terms of the flashback, right? The flashback informing characters, Kevin's backstory, and then like cryptic remarks at the end of a chapter in which you're talking to the Edgelord or you're talking to the Lord of Phantasma. And most of these don't tell the player anything. It's only really after you've fought Luva and you see Rufina and she sends you down to hell, that you're really starting the plot of the game, and by that point you're almost done with the game.
You could say it's about self exploration. It's about the journey more than the destination. But Colin, like the journey is really with the I don't want to say cutscenes, but the flashbacks with Kevin and Reese and Rufina in the beginning of each chapter, and some expository development when the Lord of Phantasma appears at the end of the chapters.
I think the way to really define this, and it's weird because we were talking about FC and SC in terms of these are character-driven games, right? And they are. They're also plot-driven games. Maybe a little bit slower than on most games, but still, there's an overarching plot. And there is an overarching plot in this, but this game is almost entirely character-driven. You are playing this game to see how Kevin wound up the way that he wound up. Almost all of the good bits have to do with either deep dives into other characters, or they have to do with introducing us to Kevin's own trauma. In a sense, the plot itself around Phantasma and who the Lord of Phantasma is, and even the revelation that this is the device by which the Aureole created dreams for people and brought that into the world for people, it feels a bit inconsequential.
Because it comes, like you said, so late. It's the end even of chapter 7, and also in the as we go to the final dungeon, we get the stakes of this is bleeding through. It's a big expansion into the mundane, the world of what previously was basically just Kevin going through his demons, and it's a bit uneasy, this sudden expansion pack, so to speak.
Yeah, and it's I feel like we do this all the time, right? We're huge fans of the series, and then we just spend the first 10 minutes of an episode beating it to death with a baseball bat. This game is a good game. It's a fun game, and the character exploration of Kevin Graham is one of the strongest character explorations I've seen in fiction, much less in video games.
It's 100% right. We do this because, well, that's our nature to pinprick, to argue, to find as academics. And two, it's coming from a place of deep engagement. If this game sucked, or such that you didn't even finish it, we wouldn't be here talking for more than an hour about a game we sunk a couple of dozen hours into.
No, we probably would have just moved on and picked something else different with our lives. And this game is compelling. Especially, like, there is always that, especially when I first played it, I found that I wanted to get to the end of the chapter because I wanted to see what the next cryptic hint was, but then I also knew when I get onto the other side and start the next chapter that I'd see a little bit more aspect of, like, church life, or descriptions of the orphanage where Kevin was, or something here about the Gralsritter. Like, there are aspects of world building that the game really just brings out and traps the interest of the player in.
I completely agree. The world building is good. We got some really good stuff in the prologue before we were captured, before we were transported to the world of Phantasma. And at least for me, my criticisms aside, this is an A game for me. We can talk, ratings, where did this place among the three we've done so far in the end, but like you said, I quite like this game. And even though for you it was, and tell me if I'm wrong, a bit lesser with the way you experienced it, still a very good game. Am I correct? Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a good game. I think upon replaying it, I like it less than I liked it the first time. I think I would downgrade it a rank or whatever, but definitely I still like it.
And so one thing as we do crossspell, keep in mind or think, this is for you, what's the best way to experience the game? I don't know how, if
Yeah.
there's any, I don't want to say gimmicks, but non traditional storytelling formats like we saw with The Doors or What Say You?
No, Crossbell doesn't really have much of that. It's pretty much a return to form. This format will come back again, but if I tell you where it comes back, you'll get mad at me.
Swear to God, Colin. You're gonna say Kuro too, aren't you?
No, no. Though there's stuff in Kuro too. You could kind of see this, but no. Reverie pulls a lot of inspiration from this game in particular.
So only what, 6 games in the future, not 8.
Let's see. We got the 2 Crossbell games, and then we got the 4. So it'll be the 7th game after this. Yeah.
Only 7 games in the future, then, not 9. That's a big difference.
It's a big difference, especially some of these games get long. Like Trails of Cold Steel 3 and 4 are 100 hours long each.
Shit, bro. So
All right, so we've kind of like just talked, right? This was our off the cuff wanting to talk about. Maybe we can be a little bit more systematic with the things that we want to talk about. And so why don't we start with the man, the legend, Kevin Graham. How do you rank Kevin Graham against Joshua Estelle? What did you like about him? What's your feelings about Kevin Graham?
it's tough to rank Kevin Grant against Joshua and Estelle because Joshua and Estelle are great. Their arc was so good, interpersonal, personal as it relates to the wider world, for one. Two, we spent comparatively less time with Kevin Graham, a lot less, compared to Joshua and compared to Estelle, less so for Joshua, but still a lot of time with Joshua. This was the shortest, I think, playtime, or at the very least, it feels shorter than FC and SC. And it's a bigger ensemble cast. So and we don't see Kevin for a chapter or two. So there's that. Kevin Graham in SC already had a mini arc, if we remember. It was the joking, jocular, funny priest, haha, and at the end, actually am an assassin, heretic hunter with killing Weissman. So that's where he began the third, and we got layers like an onion. He's a complex, deep character. He really hates himself. He's a lot of darkness that is self-imposed, self-created in response to darkness coming into his life. And I think his arc was great. It's the most similar to Joshua's, but Heaven doesn't, I don't think, let go. He retains the darkness in a different way than Joshua does. I'm not sure how to describe it exactly.
Yeah, and it. Oh, I agree. I do think he tries to overcome the darkness at the end when he's asking for his new name. But especially if we're comparing this to Joshua, what's interesting is that for Joshua, his darkness is the means by which Ouroboros is able to control him. Even though he is an enforcer, and enforcers are supposed to have pretty much complete autonomy, he's basically an exception because of Weissman's power over the stigma that Joshua has. So for Joshua, getting over that darkness is also achieving autonomy, it's achieving freedom, it's running away from Ouroboros. Whereas for Kevin, the darkness that he possesses is also the power of his stigma, right? That's why he has it. And he's able to use that darkness for the side of the church. That's why he's a Dominion. And so his relationship to his darkness is very different from the one that Joshua has.
Question for you. At the end of the third and beyond, would Kevin Graham still let Estelle be captured?
Um, it's possible, but I think that he would, like, let her know and also maybe plan a bit more in terms of contingency plans. Like, I don't think that Kevin would say, oh, we can't let Estelle be a decoy because that would put her in danger. But I do think that he might help to prepare her better. He would care more about the fate after she got captured, whereas Kevin does not care about Estelle's fate when she does.
He's not sociopathic. He wouldn't go out of his way to harm her by any means. But he also wouldn't let his real fondness for her detract him from the overall mission. And after this game, he would try to meld the two as much as he was able.
Yeah, I think so. That's my impression. I like Kevin's character a lot. As I said at the top, yes. I think it's one of the best written characters, and this is something that we've come to praise Falcom for, is that there's a realness to their characters that you don't see. Like, Kevin is a dark guy, and the game doesn't shy away from that. And also, the game does not end by telling you all of Kevin's problems are resolved. It does indicate that he has changed his perspective on, say, letting Ries into his life, whereas before he was trying to do it all alone, and now he's not. But Kevin is still Kevin, and Kevin is still a flawed individual, just as Estelle is a flawed individual, just as Joshua is a flawed individual. None of these characters are perfect, and that's great. That's a good thing.
It's 1,000% a good thing. It's a lot like Joshua's arc, the end of SC. They're not healed. They're in a space where they can really start to heal and move forward.
Yeah. What did you think of Ries?
One question I have is, what's her arc on her own, insofar as we can separate Ries from Kevin? Does she have one? Or is she subordinate to Kevin Graham?
I mean, the closest that you could say to Ries having an arc is accepting Kevin back again. But even then, that's hard to justify because she's mad at Kevin for tossing her aside anyway. While Ries is a cool character, I do think that, narratively speaking, she is almost completely subordinate to Kevin.
And we've talked a number of times on this podcast, in main episodes, in significant portions of sidebars, about does everyone need an arc? Is a flat character a bad character? So on and so forth. And we came to the conclusion that you don't need an arc in every aspect. That negative growth is growth and so forth. But Ries is the deuteragonist of the game. And for her arc, for her growth, her change, we might say, to be so bound up in another, but in a different way than, say, Estelle and Joshua's were, feels a bit of a missed opportunity.
I think it's a weird thing to call it a missed opportunity, because that would imply that they wanted to explore Ries on her own as well. And
Colin, I think you're a missed weird opportunity.
Thanks, Kevin. My ears don't hurt at that at all. Anyway, no, I mean, so I get the feeling playing this game that the narrative focus of the developers is on Kevin, it's on Olivier, it's on Ren, it's on Richard, and that's about it. There's some other characters that get some advancements, like Kilika is now a little bit more interesting, right? And Shara had her moments in her door, but mostly it's those four that they're setting things up or they're exploring them into great depth. Ries as a foil for Kevin, as a companion for Kevin, we like Ries because her ability to cut through bullshit, right? From the beginning, like, she is asserting the orthodoxy of the church's teachings. She's able to fight back against Tita's mom in that sense. She's able to see through Kevin pretty much right away. She is the foil against which Kevin realizes that he's not in the right place and needs help.
Yes.
And some of the best moments of the narrative, not necessarily the doors, but of the narrative, have to come with the conversations between Ries and Kevin. She does a fantastic job fulfilling that role. Would it be nice to see Ries also have her own independent existence? Yes, but then it would have been a much different game and a much different narrative. So I don't think that we particularly needed Ries to be independent. We should recognize that she is, for sure, but I don't see it as a detriment to the game. It's not like this is a series with a lack of strong female characters.
And we've also talked at length, listened to a podcast episode archives about what makes a compelling, quote, strong female character and why Kevin Bloomfield specifically dislikes that term. And I really agree with everything that you said. And also, as a subsidiary, there's only so much space the game can devote to
Yeah.
characters. And Reese did get moments to shine, more than one, multiple, for extended periods without Kevin.
Yeah, there's an entire chapter in which she takes the reins.
Her confrontation of Kevin about how cold he is. That is a really good moment. Her standing up against her direct superior. So I'll amend it by saying it's not a missed opportunity for the reasons that we've just talked about.
Now, one question that we should think about as well, too, though, other than Reese's relationship with Kevin, she has one personality trait, which is that she likes to eat food. What are your opinions about the focus placed upon that?
I would have liked it if we got maybe just a one scene glimpse of, food insecurity when they were young, or something of that nature to make it a bit deeper than ha ha glutton.
Yeah, that's it. It comes off as meaningless. It's a fun addendum, right? And there's some good jokes about it, sure, but it doesn't lead us to learn anything more about the character. And given that this is her only other basis of personality, it's a bit bizarre to me.
It is. It's a missed opportunity because we've seen these personality quirks emblematic of deeper trauma, psychological issues, what say you, from other characters in these games.
Yeah, look at Shara, right? We've seen Shara's past and how this informs, or rather, how she's grown past some of her past traumas. But then we go back into her door and we see where she came from. Food is really important for who she is as a person and why she's considering different aspects of strength. That's one of the biggest themes of this entire game, is what strength is, and how many of these characters start off with a flawed idea of strength and then are dragged kicking and screaming to realizing that strength really means things like depending on people who care about you, being able to be kind, even in the face of adversity. Ries doesn't participate in that theme other than giving Kevin the final push to realize what strength is himself.
No, and it's not like we knew that her views were really self-actualized. She was comfortable in who she was, knowing her place in the world, how she wanted to protect, use her strength. I don't know.
I mean, it certainly seems that way. She seems pretty much fully formed. Which, that's not a bad thing. I kind of appreciate... Sometimes I appreciate somebody just being comfortable with who they are.
They're a rock that others can go to for stability or to measure their own progress against.
Yeah, I suppose so. Want to talk about doors?
Yeah. We had moon doors and star doors. Moon doors were really long. Star doors, less so.
I think, in my opinion, like, star doors are pretty much a good length. Some of these moon doors, dude, especially the school, the one with Tita and Agate, both of them, even though that's a weird case in which it's both one door, but fine. And then also the weird Happiness Stone one. these go on for way, way too long.
I completely 1,000% agree.
The school one especially. I mean, the school one goes on for like. Granted, I was streaming it, so it took me a little bit longer than normal, but multiple hours of just going through this, and they throw so much at you, and it's interesting, right? It's showing us how Chloe is grappling with ideas of strength. It's introducing us to the character of Lecter, and Lecter's super important. But then we also get a lot of focus placed on other characters that I don't know if we really needed the focus on, like on the whole student council, or on this blonde chick who's the president, or the vice president. I'm not really certain why so much emphasis is placed on certain things. And, okay, a lot of things in these games do point towards things happening in future games, some of which you can figure out pretty easily, like bringing up, what's-his-face, not Bismarck. What is his actual name?
Osborne?
Osborne. Yeah, like, bringing up Osborne, it's pretty clear that, like, Osborne's going to be important, and therefore we should keep an eye on them. Or Killica becoming a spy thing, okay, that might be interesting. But then other things, I've played through most of the games, and I still don't know why we have this happiness stone door. At some point, Falcon needs to explain why that was so important.
One thing I wonder beyond is Idios a fucking dragon? With some of these,
I think the dragon was an avatar of Idios. I don't think it is Idios.
okay, let's not talk about Christology, Colin.
Okay, it's a sidebar topic, right?
Would some of these doors have been better if they cut all the gameplay elements and made them basically visual novels that we saw, say, Star Door 15, that kind of format? Because there was some
I
bloat
think so.
in Moon Door 2 just running around with Chloe.
Yeah, no, totally. I think so. Some of the strongest writing that we've seen in this game, Star Door 15. Also, Star Door 8 with Olivier versus Osborne. When the game just takes control away from the player and they say, we are going to give you this concentrated, interesting story, please watch. Now, granted, with Agate and Tita, other than the one fight that you do, that is a visual novel, and it's still pretty effing long.
Editing in general is good. Cutting fat, it's tough to kill your darlings, but you gotta do it. And you hit on what makes the really good doors good. It's explaining, giving new facets to the characters. Shara and her past, Ren and her past, Olivier and his future with and against Osborne. It's not as it relates to their relationship with Kevin Graham for the most part. It's about them and their own world, where they are the protagonists.
Yeah, I don't think any of the doors really impugn or impinge upon Kevin Graham at all. Which isn't a good choice, right? Because it's showing these characters as you say, as protagonists in their own lives. What did you think about this game's decision to focus primarily, not exclusively, because with Olivier there is like nods towards the future, but this game takes an opportunity to flesh out the past of a lot of characters who we played with. Did we need that? Like, did we need to see Chloe interact with all of these orphans?
Did we need it? No, not by any means. It gave us a greater appreciation for Chloe. It made her deeper, but I think the game could have been as good if it didn't have it, because the game does not care, or the game does not really change many of the side characters. They're pretty static from beginning to end, with the exception of Olivier and Shara, but they're pretty static.
Well, Ren changes as well.
Yes,
Ren
with
definitely
Ren.
changes.
With Ren. But they're the exceptions.
But like, if we're trying to think about this game and its narrative pacing, a lot of the doors that only by virtue of what you just said, say Shara's door, the Joshua and Estelle door, the Raven's door, a lot of the doors, they serve to flesh out some characters. The Mayor Maybell door as well. They seem to simply be there. And if we just strip the game into its, like, what doors are absolutely essential for this? Like, why are we playing this game? And part of that just comes down to knowledge of what's happening elsewhere in the series, but it kind of seems to me like Star Door 8 is essential watching. Star Door 13, the one with Ouroboros, that's essential watching.
Yes.
Star Door 15 is essential watching. And the Moon Door in which Kilika is revealed to be a spy chief, or has been recruited in Calvard. That's pretty essential. Other than that, like, maybe there's one that I'm missing. Happy to be corrected on Twitter. And maybe I'll disagree with this take completely, but stripped down to the essentials, we have a bare bones plot and these 4 really important doors that you have to watch. And you can make an argument for the Tita stuff with the creation of the mechs, sure. But other than that, it does seem like the game has really high highs. And I like the door system in theory, but the more I think about it, it seems like the doors add more bloat than anything else.
I think they do.
Good bloat if you like the stories. I'm not trying to pass a judgment on the existence of the stories, just that if we're trying to streamline it, a lot of what makes this game is the door systems. But most of them you can cut and not lose the core of the game.
From what you've said, no other games in this series from beyond this point do something similar. Do you think that's them acknowledging some of this non importance or the bloat? Why don't we see more games like the third? To be a counterfactual, Colin.
Well, I did literally say that Reverie takes great inspiration from this game. And you've also heard me bitch about Reverie on the podcast before. So it's not an idea that's completely abandoned. But it is the case that the games from this point on until Reverie take a more linear point A to point B storytelling. And I think that it's because this game, in terms of its narrative structure, is pretty experimental. Most of the story is told in the past. There's a very, very small portion of it that happens in the present. I think they tried, and I think that they came to the conclusion that if they want to push this world further, if they want to push their broader narrative further, putting more stories in the here and now is more satisfying, frankly easier to pull off, and in a lot of cases a bit more interesting. You know, we could go back and talk about the events of FC and SC. Not so much the third.
No, you're completely right about that. It's so tied up with Kevin. And once Kevin retreats from the narrative, then what larger impacts are there that aren't setting up stuff for future arcs, future games?
I mean, the whole point is to stop Phantasma from having an impact on the inside world, right? It kind of limits itself.
You could cut the game. If you somehow gave the player the option to watch the setups, the doors, being a counterfactor, but the actual events of the game themselves are so personal. Like if Kevin Graham killed Weissman and then dropped dead of an aneurysm, and Phantasma never came into being, or what say you, I feel like the series could continue on without a hitch. But FC and SC were pivotal inflection points. Do you get what I'm saying here?
I get what you're saying, and I mean, it's difficult for me to fully agree because that makes a lot of assumptions about events that happen later and later and later. And something that I realized when I played Hajimari, when I played Reverie, I too had this feeling that this game doesn't need to exist. That this story does not really impact anything outside of itself because, quite literally, the status quo before the game starts is the status quo of the world after the game ends. And so a lot of stuff that happens in the plot in the middle seemed useless. Having played through Kuro and played through a little bit of Kuro 2, I'm a little bit more sympathetic to Reverie because I've seen how the developers have taken aspects from that plot and brought it forward. And I hesitate to say how much because, frankly, I forget all of the stuff. But you're right that this is very dependent upon Kevin. But I still think that this game has enough setting up, even, as you say, that it is important for the rest of the series. I've been bitching about this game that I love, for the past almost 40 minutes, and I would still say that everybody should play this game. This is not a skippable game. There are no skippable games, but this one definitely is not.
No, no, no.
I want to talk a bit about gameplay. And it's hard to talk about gameplay because, well, the gameplay is the same as all of the other games that we've played so far. In fact, I don't think that there's a single gameplay addition to the battle system other than the existence of the support slot. But I want to talk about two things that irked me. One of which is level scaling, and the other one is dungeon design. Which one do you want me to start with first?
Let's do dungeon design because it's such a central element. And again, guys, I promise, both of us did like this game.
I know, we really did, but it is also just how our minds work, is that we pick apart everything and complain about it. Because it's a lot easier to understand how something works by noticing the flaws and explaining the flaws, rather than just looking at something and saying, isn't that great? We should probably spend more time analyzing the pros as well, but we only have so much time. Anyway, okay, dungeon design. Dungeon design has not changed since FC and SC, and I have complained about dungeon design in FC and SC because essentially dungeons in those games are hallways, in which then maybe a little bit you skirt off the beaten path, find a treasure chest, and then keep going on. And while I didn't think that the dungeons were that great in those games, what those games had in addition kind of made up for it. You had towns to go to, you had side quests, you had compelling side characters, you had the whole plot of the game. The dungeons were not necessarily fun to go through, but you didn't mind doing it. It's like an easy stroll to then get to the next plot point. This game is a dungeon crawler. The entire gameplay aspect is getting to the end of the dungeon every single chapter. Half of them don't even have assets. Half of them are just put in space-time, and they are hallways you walk down, to the point where with the minimap you can even tell, oh, I should make a detour here to the right to grab this chest that's in plain sight and then keep going. There is no such thing as exploration. There are practically no puzzles to solve, and whatever puzzles there are to solve in that one point in which you're going back to Leilakla is the exact same puzzle we solved in the beginning of SC. There's no evolution in dungeon design to the point where it felt like a slog at some point, because I'm thinking after 3 games, we have to do more than walk in a straight line. And that's what you do.
If you're going to have a dungeon crawler, I think the dungeons themselves should be a big, meaningful component beyond the opportunities for combat, for loot, and so forth. With design, with puzzles, with so many elements.
Persona 5 Royal does a fantastic job of doing this. Where, you have like your central hub that you have social events in, and there's some stuff there, but each of the dungeons you experience are huge, and they're filled with secrets to explore. There are interesting narrative things that happen in them. They're interesting environments. It's a joy to go through a palace in Persona, and that's the majority of the gameplay in Persona 5 is going through these dungeons. Obviously, you can't make Trails in the Sky the third model after a game that hadn't been released yet, but I'm just pulling that up as an example of a game that takes a similar formula as this and does it right.
Yeah.
So let me bitch about grinding too,
please.
I've defended grinding on this podcast. I think it can be fun at times if you're like, I don't know, I've grinded to the end of Final Fantasy VI. I got all my characters up to level 99 just by drinking a bottle of wine and playing it all night. There's a certain zen to that. I chose to do that because I wanted to beat that game without any challenge. In this game, it kind of comes back to our old friend, the experience scaling system, in which the higher level you get, the less experience you get. And in the other 2 games, that was more or less fine. Now, granted, I played this game on hard mode, and I hadn't played the other ones on hard mode. Though Kevin has played it in Nightmare, I think all of them on Nightmare. It's definitely this game in Nightmare. And
no, not the first game, because remember, that's where we got the expression
to pull a Kevin.
Holding a Kevin, yes.
Which now I think I've done more than you have, but
Yeah, I think so.
But with this game, I found multiple times my progress stymied, where I was doing great against all of the enemies that I was fighting. I had no reason not to think that I was not at the correct level, to the point where it seemed like I wasn't getting any experience, only to realize, oh, I need to gain like 2 more levels in order to get past this boss. And people will say, oh, levels don't matter in Trails. Bullshit, yes they do, because you can change nothing and level up twice and all of a sudden take a lot less damage and deal a lot more damage. A fight can go from impossible to easy within 2 levels, depending on where you are. And those levels took a while. I'm talking like a couple of hours of having to sit down on the couch and just, rub it out and get it done, because I needed to get it done. And that, at least...
I want to make very clear that this podcast does not endorse public rubbing it out.
Correct. Don't do it in public. Anyway, what I was, at least in those circumstances, like there's a spider boss I remember throwing myself against time and time again and then couldn't do it and just had to grind my way through. But that was with one party. That was simply with one party, and that's it. Then at the end of the game, it turns out you have to grind up everybody to a certain level. And that took me hours to do, Kevin. We could have finished this podcast a lot sooner, except that I had to carve out multiple evenings to get that done before I could even do the final dungeon. Now, granted, doing in the final dungeon probably actually would have made it faster, but it felt like a large part of the gameplay of this game wasted my time. And that's one of the things that I really glued in on, and one of the reasons why this game has fallen in my favor compared to the first 2 games, whereas before I didn't notice that. Maybe it's a difficulty thing, but I did feel like this game wasted my time a lot more than FC and SC ever did.
It's tough to not be relentlessly negative when the really good stuff in the game is proportionally for its screen time, number of seconds, minutes, and hours, a comparatively less, where I say the relationship with
Lower.
Joshua and Estelle in FC, and then Estelle's finding herself in SC with and without Joshua was something we explored within the game, playing the game. If this makes sense to you, what I'm saying here, that
Yeah. Totally.
the game was the story.
The things that made FC and SC special were given to the player as rewards for playing the game. Whereas with this game, it's more, we see some special stuff, now I get to go play the game, and the game itself in isolation isn't as strong as the other 2 because it's not linked to those strong moments. It's inconsistent.
When it's high, it's so high. So, they could
It's
be
so
some
high.
of these moments.
Star Door
Yeah,
15.
some of my favorite I've experienced in almost any game. Like you say, Star Wars 15. But I think the median is lower.
Yeah. I think that if we went through all of the Star Doors and categorized it as killer, okay, and wastes of time, there would be more wastes of time than we would have thought in the beginning. Or that even I had thought in the beginning. Just going back and taking a more critical view.
Happiness, Ravens, it's 2 top of my head.
Yeah. And it also depends on how much you like world building. So, like, I know that you didn't like the Salt Pail one. No, you like the Salt Pail one. We got a lot of good discussion on the Salt Pail one.
Fuck you, Colin.
I'm backing off from my false claim. But another one of those info dumps. You like the one about the Orbital Revolution. You're like, okay, this is there. Blue Blanc, I don't think you like that much either. Some of these doors are hit or miss. And some of them maybe take more of an interest later on. But still. One thing that I will give this game a lot of credit for is that there's a lot of really interesting world-building moments that I don't think FC and SC were able to give us because this game removes itself from the strict chronology of a linear story. The Salt Pail is a perfect example of that. That is a hugely important event that we could see in a completely different perspective because of the door system. We just couldn't get that in the previous 2 games.
No, we could not.
So, is there anything else that you want to talk about analytic-wise, or should we go to your predictions?
Let's go to my predictions.
Okay.
because a lot we've talked about almost all the great big moments as individual episodes. But say Star Wars 15, how does that impact? What new appreciation for Star Wars 15 do we have with the game complete? I don't think much of any. You know what I'm saying?
With the game complete, yeah, I think a little bit, because at the end of the game you
The
see
end.
Ren truly starting to like accept Estelle, and now with Starter 15 you see that there's a lot of shit there with her parents and feelings of betrayal and trauma, that her being able even to say I love you to Estelle and Joshua is a huge moment. So I do think that one, the ending, really fills out.
I wonder though, the people who skipped the Star Wars as many as they could, what did they think when Ren had this sudden about change end of the game? But we can't answer that. It must have been a wild experience.
Well, I think that if you're skipping Star Wars, you don't care about the story that much anyway. And in that case, why the fuck are you playing Trails?
Yes, why the fuck indeed. So, transition time. I had a lot of predictions. In FC and SC, I was pretty spot on for a good amount. Colin,
Some of them you were completely off, but a lot of them you were spot
Colin,
on.
I do not think that streak has continued to this game.
Some things you guessed pretty right, but no, a lot of stuff you were like, because you didn't know how experimental this game was.
No, I was lulled into a false sense of security by how straight some of these archetypes were played in the previous two games.
So like
Fucking 10-year-old assassin bullshit.
one of your first predictions was about seeing familiar faces and meeting new characters. How did you rank up on that?
I thought we had a small party, like maybe seven. That's about the size of FC and SC. Maybe a bit more. I thought we'd see Agate, Tita, maybe Shira, no one else. Colin, how would you rate that prediction?
Wrong, because we saw literally everybody.
Is there anyone who we saw as a playable character in the first two games, including Julia and Mueller, who did not appear?
No, every single player character is here, with a few additions. But even Josette is here.
I forgot about Josette. She was playable in SCF. I literally forgot about that. The game it's a big send off for the liberal arc. Also, we didn't get that much change from beginning to end of the game. So it's, I don't know, new ones we've not met before. I said yes.
No.
And yeah. And then we talked about people that we've seen but haven't played, or versus people that we had no idea existed. And obviously, I could not guess the latter type of character for obvious reasons. But correct me if I'm wrong. Besides Reese, who did we play who we had never met before? Anyone?
I don't think so. You could make... Depending on how much you paid attention to the Ravens. Because you play as the Ravens, and they're kind of forgettable up until you play them, right? But we have met them before.
Oh my god, Colin. Oh my god. That does not count, Colin. That does not count.
Okay. No, all the playable characters we've met before in some capacity.
Yeah.
Here's what I'm shocked by, Kevin. Because you guessed that we would play as Cassius. I think that's a good guess. I knew it was wrong, but I think it's a good guess. What I was shocked by was that you did not think once about Richard and Ren, because they're on the cover of the game, and they are in the opening cutscene, and you notice that they were there, and you're just like, I wonder why they're there, and then completely forgot about them.
It's especially bad because I also do remember asking, I see avatar sprites of Josette. Is she a playable character? When you load the game in the top corners.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also sprites of Ren and Richard that I think it's random every time you open the game.
Yeah.
I should have. And also, like you said, on the cover of the game, very prominently, it's Kevin and Reese, Joshua and Estelle, Ren and Richard, and that might be it. Let
Yeah,
me check.
that is it. And they're like in front of a church or something.
So it's yeah, that's a goof on my part, and I should have. But I guess fucking Kanone.
I mean, I think Kanone is a good guess too, and we do see some. We do see a little bit of her right in Richard's door.
Well, I guess Cassius in part, he's so OP. He's like a crutch, tank crutch. When we kind of got that with Richard.
Yeah, we saw a bit. Like he's easily the best unit of the game. Uh, the only failure he has is that he has a lack of AoE abilities. He has a little bit of AoE, but not that much. I did think it was kind of
No.
cool that we got to fight Cassius.
Yes. Twice. No, just once.
You only fight him. You only fight him twice if you fuck up the first time and hit retry.
You fight Richard in that store, not Cassius.
Annalise.
Yes, not Annette.
Annette is a character from
Three houses.
Fire Emblem Three Houses. The only other video game Kevin has ever played.
The voice actress for Annette sang Lifelight for Super Smash Bros.
I always thought that song was fucking weird.
Eat shit and die, Colin.
I probably will. Though I don't want to die. What were your predictions for the setting of the game? Because Phantasm was kind of weird, right? Oops, sorry.
Yes.
Phantasm was kind of weird.
So I predicted, we have two options. Is this the mundane or the spooky alternate dimensions like the towers from the end of SE? I said most likely the latter, and that's basically spot on.
It's not quite the same thing because there are dimensions, and then this is like a pocket reality created by a Septarian, which I think is technically different. Because you're not traveling through different worlds, it's in a area within one world. But still, fucking bizarre.
So the Lord of Phantasma, the realms wherever they're in, it and he, I said, are reflections or mirrors or doppelgangers conjured up by Kevin's inner psyche and probably something unresolved. Trauma, maybe, on those lines. But I was so
You were
confident.
totally right about
But I
that.
was so confident it was literally a doppelganger of Kevin. And if I hadn't specified it's Kevin, I would be 100% right. I'm still mostly right. It's still a kind of a doppelganger taking another form. I did not guess Rufina at all.
I mean, we've also talked before how I don't think that the Rufina reveal is properly foreshadowed. The game leads you to expect it to be Kevin Graham.
It does. And we also said this is not necessarily a bad thing. We do not always need foreshadowing, sometimes a twist.
No. You have said that. I do not say that. Just like how sometimes you say it's okay to leave things unresolved. I do not say that.
Colin, sometimes people go out to buy some milk, go to the store to get some cigarettes.
But Kevin, what? And then they don't. But what do the cigarettes mean, Kevin? It means they're cool people and they're having a fun time.
So I was pretty good on the setting and what Lord of Phantasma represented. So I predicted the Salt Pail was done by a force opposed to Idios, a Lucifer, a Manichaean foil, and we got no information whatsoever on that. That's we can't judge.
The only thing that we were told is that it seems like it's an artifact, but in fact it is not.
And we'll see
And artifacts are created by Adios, which is why that's relevant.
what, if anything, more we get in future games. Maybe yes, maybe it's still a mystery. I did predict Kevin predicts that Kevin Graham was involved somehow in the death of Rufina. But Colin, that's not that big a prediction. We saw him holding her body.
Yeah, I mean, it was basically told to us in the second chapter.
Themes. I got the themes of the game. What drives Kevin? Uncomfortable truths. The past. And again, that's pretty obvious.
Yeah. You say that you didn't get a whole lot of these right, but I think you got over 50% success rate.
I think so too. So actually, I'm Nostradamus, not Nostradamus. And then Will Kevin and Reese's relationship motivate the game, be a microcosm of the game, like we saw with Joshua and Estelle in the first two? I said I don't think so, and I'm not sure how to judge this.
It's their relationship is central, but their relationship is central because Kevin Graham is central. Not
Yes.
necessarily because the relationship is central, like it is for especially SC.
No, you could have a lot less relationship between Kevin and Reese, whereas you could not with SC.
Correct. And they do that. I mean, there is some like tension in the air between Reese and Kevin, right? But it's not a romance. They are not going out together, at least as far as I'm aware. That's not the point either. The point is more familial love they share for each other and how that helps turn Kevin to the correct side of thinking about things and helping him overcome his guilt. But again, that's the relationship between two characters changing one character. Whereas with Estelle and Joshua, it was about two characters changing to then culminate in a relationship with each other.
Yes, and you could not have SC without the relationship with Kevin, with Joshua and Estelle.
No.
You, I believe, could have the third without developments.
Eh, I don't know if I'd agree with that. I do think that Kevin needs Reese to make the jump. So yeah, you got most of your predictions right. You were completely wrong about the kinds of characters, but that's fine. Your settings were pretty spot on. Your themes also spot on. We also could throw in the theme of strength as we had talked about, but that's fine.
I don't think games should hide themes, and this one didn't. Like, it's true that it's games. It's good when you know what issues are you grappling with on a more fundamental, deeper level. If the game says in the last three quarters, this is the theme. Actually, I can't think of an example where, off the top of my head, where that would happen and it'd be good.
So one game kind of does this called Tales of Arise, and I don't think it does it very successfully. also, Final Fantasy VIII kind of does it about Switch about its themes, where it starts off as talking about like political themes and then it turns into a love story. The love story is, it's decent enough, I suppose. Why there's time travel in it, I still don't know. In any, in any case, no, I think that the game does a very good job at exploring its themes and laying it out for the player to really experience and think about and talk about. Yeah, this is a good game. I don't think I can call it a great one anymore. There are great moments, but as a package, should we talk rankings?
For me, SC is number one.
I'll lay my cards out on the table. Trails in the Sky the Third is the weakest one in the Liberal trilogy. It is number 3. Then FC is number 2, and SC is number 1.
I think we know why. The Joshua Estelle, the Weissman, the culmination of those of the gospel, it's so good. I think FC might be number two. The introduction to the world and the gameplay was so well done. Joshua Estelle was so captivating. The highs of the third were higher than FC and SC. Like we said, the median the median experience is lower. There's a lot of stuff that was annoying to get through. The lack of Bracer Guild quests. No.
That's one thing we didn't even talk about. There are no side quests, and side quests are part of what made SC especially amazing. I guess the star doors are kind of like side quests in that you have to go out of your way to get them, but they're also so. I mean, and also they serve a similar purpose in terms of giving you money, and sometimes quest rewards. But I don't think that they really serve the same function. They try to, but they don't.
No, it's they're too heavy. I almost want to say, or they try to be too heavy. A lot of them are too long, and they're not really quests, not really interactive. They're experienced more than they're played.
Some of them are played, but almost to their detriment. Like the whole one with
Yes.
Shera leading Ina down the sewers. You're playing most of that.
Yeah, yeah. That's the exception.
So we have walked away with identical rankings. I agree with everything that you said.
And I want to say something about this was a tough episode to tougher to record than I think we thought because the retrospective look at the game as a whole, so many of the good moments are episodic or non-connected. We can really only talk about
Mhm.
Kevin's journey, and we did a lot of that last week.
Yeah, which because that's the only thing we could talk about because that's what the finale was.
Yeah, it's. I'm not sure what more to say.
Again, it's a good game. I'm glad I replayed it. I wish I had replayed it in the way that I intended to, which was to take my time. Like, I took my time, but I also rushed through a lot of stuff. And again, this just comes down to me and some decisions that I made. But I wish I had spent more time in the garden talking to our party members to, like, see the interactions there and to, like, really soak that in. Because they're great characters. You don't really see most of them if you don't do that. Um, and the few dialogues that I've seen are quite good. I never did it because I needed to get the chapters done so we could record so that I can then go and do everything else that I needed to do. Been a very busy past 6 months, and I'm not sure when it's going to calm down. Um, so yeah, I mean, I could see myself replaying the game for that purpose, but it wouldn't be in terms of I need to experience this game a third time. It's more I didn't experience it the second time the way I wanted to, so I should rectify that, if that makes sense.
It totally does.
Do you have anything else you want to talk about, or should we talk about the tentative schedule for July?
I think we should talk about what's going to happen in the month of July.
So, this is a tentative schedule,
The 4th of July is going to
the 4th
happen.
of July, and also the 5th of July, which isn't a holiday, but it is going to happen. This
Yes.
is a tentative schedule because by the time the same day that this episode releases, assuming everything went well, I will be using a U-Haul to move all the crap out of the apartment that I'm in now into a new apartment that I'm moving in with a friend. That includes like all of my gaming shit and my computer equipment, which includes my recording stuff. If things do not go well and I do not get everything changed in, that will interrupt some things. So hopefully that doesn't happen. But first of all, we're planning a full month of episodes. Normally we like take a week off, but we've been taking a lot of weeks off for different stuff. July we want to try to do as much as we can. There are 4 things we want to touch on. The first is there's a manga called The Ring of Judgment it serves as a prequel, a pre-story, I should say, to Trails from Zero. I've never read this. I'm looking forward to reading it. I know that it stars Estelle and Joshua after the events of Trails in the Sky the Third, so that's going to be cool to read. Then, attentive listeners to the podcast will know that Kevin and I have had a long-standing bet that he has wanted me to watch Attack on Titan, and I don't like being told what to do. So I said, why don't we make an agreement that if you play all of the Trails games, then I'll watch Attack on Titan. And then we set up a podcast in which it takes us half a year to play one of the Trails games. So it doesn't take a genius to figure out that it would have meant that I would have to start watching Attack on Titan in like 2026, 2027. All part of my dastardly plan. Assuming, of course, that other Trails games comes out too, which would have taken us forever. In order to be a bit kinder, because I also think that when Kevin agreed to that bet, he thought that I said play one of the Trails games and I'll watch the anime. And that's not what I said. I have decided that there are 4 seasons of Attack on Titan. Right now there are 4 arcs. There's the Liberl arc, Crossbell arc, Cold Steel arc, Kuro arc. So now that we have finished the Liberl arc, I will watch season 1 of Attack on Titan. And we will talk about season 1 of Attack on Titan. Now, spoiler alert, I've already binged 11 episodes, and I have a feeling I'm going to be watching the whole series. So we might have more of those coming up as sidebars, and I think I've just lost this bet. But that's okay. We will talk about season 1 when I'm done. Then, back to Kiseki, back to Falcom. There is a spin-off game that had been translated by the Geofront, I think, called Ries versus Kiseki. It's a fighting game starring people from the Kiseki series and from the E series. I've played a bit of the E series. Kevin hasn't played any. It's not a long game. It's like a 3-hour game to play through the story. The reason why I wanted to put it in this slot is I never played it before. Always wanted to. And this is Lloyd from the Crossbell games actually appears in this game first. Because this game comes out first, if I remember correctly. So I figured it'd be kind of a fun thing for us to play through that and talk about it. I'm not thinking that's going to be a huge episode, but it'll be cool to experience that. And finally, attentive listeners to the podcast will know that I forced Kevin to play through Fire Emblem Path of Radiance. And in return, he told me that I had to play Planescape Torment. And as with Attack on Titan, I don't like being told what to do. And so I've been kind of dragging my heels on it. And I've also gotten very, very busy. So now the date is set. I will finish Planescape Torment by the end of July, assuming everything is turning out well, because I'll have to have my computer to play it. I've tried to play it on the deck. Do not play it on the deck. It is not a good experience. I could play it on the PS5, but the PS5, that game is currently in a box in Mateo's apartment. Either way, so the goal is to get that game done by the end of July. We'll have that episode, and then we will start off with Trails from Zero in August.
I'm looking forward to all of this. We had such a great discussion of the Luva manga. I'm looking forward to see what kind of story are they going to give us here. Talk about Attack on Titan. I've never played Ries. It seems familiar. You said, I believe the combat's fairly similar. And I think you said there's some crossover.
I have never said that E's combat is similar to Kiseki. Not once.
Well, I'm choosing to believe you did. I notoriously do.
They are drastically different games. I don't know how this game plays either, but Ease and Kiseki are different in the fact that Trails is turn-based and Ease is not.
My oh my. And I believe there's a crossover, not this game, but Ys Nayuda or something.
Yeah, so that's a crossover in that it plays like a Ease game, but it is a Trails game. And we will play that. We'll play that after Azure before we start Cold Steel.
Good to know. Good to know. And it'll be good. I'm looking forward to it all. I'm looking forward to a bit of a break from the game before we start into the next arc, which, gotta say, Colin, you've been hyping up Crossbell so much. I think you said it's your favorite arc or the favorite games.
Yeah, it is my favorite arc. I think Kuro has the possibility of being that when it's done, but I really, really like Crossbell. And look, we hyped Stardew Valley 15 a lot, and you were not disappointed, so I hope that you won't be disappointed by my hype for Crossbell.
Until next time, I just want to say 49 episodes done. It's an accomplishment. It's an accomplishment.
Next one will be number 50. It is an accomplishment.
We have.
I think at this point we've now been over a year of recording.
Cannot wait for the next year.
And it's been a ton of fun. I can't imagine doing this with anybody else.
Fuck a hand transition. Until next time, I'm Kevin. That's Colin. See you next... God damn it.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Bye-bye. Maybe Kevin will have a better transition to open up the next podcast.